Welcome back, bad movie lovers, to the worst movie of the year, a City Geek podcast. If you were wondering where we were last week after our normally coming out every Sunday, we did skip last week because unfortunately we had some connection issues here in Seattle because, well, Seattle is on fire currently. But we're not going to talk about any of that tonight. This is a podcast that's supposed to be whenever you listen to it, since bad movies are always coming out. People are always watching bad movies. But we are the worst movie of the year, a City of Geek podcast, as I said. And what we do here, if you're coming to us for the very first time, thank you. If you're returning, what the hell is wrong with you? But this is our basic setup here. Is every week I go to Metacritic, and every week I choose a random year between 1965 and the current year, go down to Metacritic and find the worst movie of that year we haven't talked about that is commercially available. So we are in our 7th episode, I think, and we are looking at 2019's The Haunting of Sharon Tate.
Oh, yes.
Which is, it's great that we have all 4 members of City Geek here for the first time. This is Kim's first time doing
I know.
It is. I know. I'm excited.
Now, what I think is actually very interesting is I'm the only person who did not see this movie prior to this particular worst movie of the year challenge. So,
yeah, I was just about to say that it was our on our best and worst of last year podcast, because we have a regular podcast. Check it out, citygeek.com. It was ultimately our worst movie of last year. Between the 3 of us who had seen it, it brings so low that it sunk it, even if Tony's input wasn't there at the point. Yeah. So this is our worst movie of 2019 and our 7th episode of worst movie of the year. So yeah, this, so anyone who might be listening for the first time, we may not know our voices. Let's go ahead and introduce yourselves. I'm Bob.
I'm Tony.
I'm Kim.
I'm Cody.
It's weird when we don't have a table to be able to figure out our order.
I know, exactly.
And because we normally have our City Geek podcast putting up as we can. So, but it's interesting coming here talking about one particular movie instead of just whatever striking our boat for the particular week, floating our boat. But yeah, Tony and Cody have been on previous episodes, and this is the first time for Kim. So thank you for joining us.
But my response every week when you announce the movie has been, is it available for free? Because I ain't paying for that shit.
And for the first week, it is.
Yay! Or,
And before we start talking about the movie itself, this is, or about the details of it, this little background. This is The Haunting of Sharon Tate. It came out April 5th of last year, of 2019. It never opened theatrically in the United States, so the only box office info I have. Huh?
Shocked face.
Is it made $14,000 in Russia and $5,000 in Portugal. The only 2 places it opened.
Wow. $14,000 in Russia.
And per numbers.com, it made only $12,000 in DVD and video sales.
That much?
It's been on Amazon Prime for free since it came out. So I guess people were just watching it that way. It has an 8 on Metacritic and a 3.1 audience rating. So no one likes this movie. The highest rating on Metacritic is actually a 90 from
What?
Grant, I think.
From who?
Yeah, it's 90, then goes to 50, then a bunch of zeros.
I'm judging whoever gave it 90. I'm actively judging them.
I haven't read the review yet because I never read the reviews until after these things. So I don't want to, put particular phrasings or ideas in my head. So I'm interested in checking that out after that. Tony, this is the first time you watched it after listening to our rants. Did it hold up to the awfulness that we ranted about back in December?
Well, this was like the very first sentence I wrote almost autonomically, like it was possessed my hand to write this, or type it out rather, was, of course it's tasteless. That's the point. Which is definitely the case. On the face of on the face of it, this is a super kind of formulaic, very poorly written little kind of horror exploitation movie, but unbelievably, to its credit, the first time I watched it, the first quarter of it, I was deeply unsettled. And I think the reason why was what got under my skin is basically how routine this little horror / home invasion / exploitation movie was, but like in sharp contrast to the real life subject matter. I mean, again, that's the point. And to some extent, what was interesting is it's kind of a not so grand tradition of exploitationeers who are taking a real life event and grafting kind of one size fits all horror home invasion tropes onto something that like this real life event that is genuinely horrible and harrowing. It just was a weird goddamn movie.
You hit on something that's something I've been thinking about when watching this. And last week I watched, or 2 weeks ago, or month ago, whatever I did. I watched. Heard my voice come through. Oops. When I watched The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson from the same writer director Daniel Farrands, who made the Amityville murders 2 years ago. We can talk about either of those in a minute as well. Where I like exploitation movies. I like weird crime movies. I like always type movies, but I found these movies and I like tasteless movies in many ways, but something about these don't land right and just kind of make me upset and angry.
That's very interesting. I agree.
Well, I mean, for me, like, if it wasn't for the fact that this is based on a real life murder and tragedy, I mean, that's kind of what did it for me. Like, if this was a completely fictitious story, yeah, sure, it'd be entertaining enough. But it's not. It's milking a horrific tragedy that happens, and in a way that's really tasteless and distasteful to me.
Yes, I agree. And I think one of the things, ironically enough, I think one of the reasons why it really unsettled me, and the first portion of the movie really unsettled me, is that the character development and the dialogue feel like a cheap Lifetime movie, only it's been co-opted by, like, sadistic schoolyard bullies. It's got this real, like, just kind of, like, really, like, mean and sort of distasteful quality to it, that is, unfortunately, for better or for worse, a distinctive hallmark of grindhouse cinema. So again, it's this not so grand tradition of exploitation movie makers taking a real life tragedy and then just fucking spinning it off into, like, drive-in fodder and stuff.
When you say unsettling, do you mean that it was actually working, kind of getting underneath the skin, or kind of like
you
were upset that you were watching this? And
yeah, I mean, in a weird way, almost in spite of myself, I was finding myself deeply unsettled by it. And again, it was because it was projecting. It was like everyone is so familiar on a visceral level with the Tate LoBianco murders that for me, it was almost like it was like watching a bad Lifetime movie of an event that is so visceral, it almost feels like part of my life. It's like something that, like, made a deep and profound impression on me. And it just feels like it's really super kind of creepily exploitive of that very deep connection that a lot of people have. But at the same time, it's played in such a, like, cheesy and perfunctory manner. I mean, again, it feels like, schoolyard bullies have fucking written it. And kind of getting back to what Kim said, one of the things that really struck me, and this is kind of a variation of kind of what she riffed on earlier, which is that The Haunting of Sharon Tate isn't, like, profound. It's, like, not profoundly a Serbian film or cannibal Holocaust type offensive. It's just kind of like a smelly pair of underwear in an urban alley. They're repugnant. They're icky, but they're easily enough avoided and forgotten. And that gets right back to what Kim said.
Because I'm kind of worn.
Well, no, it's icky, though. It's icky. Like, I have an icky feeling watching this movie. And in the same way that I mean, it did remind me, like, I think, Tony, you said about the Lifetime movie. Like,
yeah.
I watched some of those bad Lifetime movies about murders, and they somehow feel less exploitive, and
even though those are based on real murders in many cases too.
Yeah, well, because it's they're at least treating it might be cheesy, but, like, they're treating it soap opera serious.
Yeah,
they're and they're not putting twists on things.
Yeah, they're not trying to blame the victim for not trying hard enough to not die.
Yeah. Well, I'll also say I spent the first. Am I the only one too? Can I ask this? Am I the only one that was like, is it just me, or is Hilary Duff sometimes British and then
Yes.
sometimes not?
Like half the movie, she's trying to do a shitty British accent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like,
There
what?
was this weird ass metamorphosing constantly of her accent, and and it was one of the other things that, of course, Farrands and company made this movie for dirt fucking cheap. So part of the quote fun unquote is looking around and seeing how they try to inject period detail, and sometimes it is something as minuscule as a fucking headband around Hilary Duff's head. That's the only thing telling us it's the 60s, and the title crawls that give like the dates. Oh, Jesus.
I had the note in there. There are about 6 different accents coming out of Sharon Tate's mouth at any particular moment.
And she was American, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was from Texas.
Yeah.
And after the movie, I went and watched a couple of interviews with her because I wanted to hear it. Because I've seen her in movies. I wanted to hear more how she talked generally. And she did have a unique voice. It was kind of like both.
Affected?
It was, there was something to it. It's like almost like she was covering it up with like the mid-Atlantic type thing.
Yeah, and trying to hide her Texas, which makes sense. That's something a lot of actors do.
After listening to that, I hear what Hilary Duff was trying to do, but she didn't land it at all. Especially since I read that this is all ADR'd afterwards, so she had chances.
Well, but I also like the ADR to me was so distracting. Like it was so obvious it had been. It's almost, there was times I was like, this almost sounds like something that was dubbed. That's how glaring and bad it was. It reminded me a little of like watching Suspiria.
Oh my God! Only without any of the artistry. Yeah,
right.
That's a very fucking good point. Very good point. I was really utterly floored at how completely insipid the dialogue was, and that adds to the strange sort of tacky yet unsettling patina, because you have these characters spouting this fucking bogus ass dialogue that's supposed exposition, like really just like sodden exposition.
For me, it's like somebody programmed one of those artificial intelligences to read about the Tate LaBianca murders, write a movie about it, but also throw in they had to read like a page on ghosts too. And
exactly. Oh my God, that pretty much pins it.
Or fate, or every line has to be, what if it'd be weird if we got murdered in August? Almost like that direct. Like
it's like she's like, it's like everything in her life is like, what would be weird? She's just sitting in line. I was brutally murdered in August by some weird hippies.
Well, she keeps talking about, she's like, in cop movies, she'd be 3 days from retirement, and all her dialogue, and her and Abigail Folger, who played by Patty Hearst's daughter. So a weird,
that was
mogul thing.
that was kind of surreal, actually.
Absolutely, I saw her last name and I was like, oh my God, and then I looked her up. I'm like, holy shit.
Playing the Folger daughter.
I mean, weirdly appropriate in some ways.
Yeah.
But
which is a weird connection to something that hasn't come up yet, but it probably will at some point. Is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, for as much as I didn't like it, I liked better than this movie. But that movie, for all the kids at the Manson camp, the Spawner Ranch, were all played by kids of other famous people. So that was a weird connection there. Where
their feet.
Both the movies
had
kids of famous people playing other famous people.
Yeah, exactly.
How much I hated them casting the fucking Cake Wars guy as the best friend. That was the
Jay Sebrig.
Was that
the guy who played Jay Sebrig? Sebig, sorry.
Yes. Oh my God.
Awful. My God.
I hate him so much when Carolyn makes me watch fucking Halloween Cake Wars every year. Even more in this.
He remind me of a low rent Dave Franco.
Oh God.
Who's already a low rent
Franco sound appealing. That's not good.
Yeah, I agree. It was really there. It's like there are all these weird places where they tried in really super stilted fashion to create like this character bonding dialogue, especially between Jay Sebring and Sharon Tate, and it just feels like it feels like some 45-year-old going, "This is how young kids in the '60s would talk." Bunk, bunk, bunk. It's like fucking. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it feels so disingenuous, and it's just, oh God. And he just has that sort of like, I'm a CW leading man sort of patina over him. So there's none of like the melancholy or gravitas you need. I mean, you're playing like a doomed guy who fucking, you know, actually made a pretty significant footnote in pop culture history by cutting the hair of Jim Morrison and creating that famous Dionysian god look. So this guy's had some sort of like pop culture impact, and he's just played like a fucking like the third lead in fucking Beverly Hills 90210. It's fucking really irritating. Very irritating. Sorry, I'm overthinking this way much.
That's why we have you on here. That's why we like you on here. Yeah. If we're
seriously,
just saying the movie sucked, then there's no fun in that. The fun is exploring those reasons, especially with your words.
Why exactly does it suck so much?
Yes,
Hilary
exactly.
Duff was like
using all the $5 words when you can come up with.
Hey, $6.50. Those are $6.50.
Are you sponsored by the word
seriously.
patina?
I really felt like this guy wanted to kind of have his rancid exploitation cake and eat it too, because the fucking murders, all of the murders, the real ones and the imagined ones, are they're like staged in super gleeful detail, and the movie actually really derives it like really milks kind of the protracted torment of Sharon Tate psychically as she keeps on having these fucking dreams. That's one of the other things that really fucking unsettled me, is it feels like the movie is really like just eager to kind of exploit all this fear and terror that's emanating from this character that, you know, based on history, is going to die horribly. And that's like really
shown to us like 4 different times, and that opening shot when it leans through the house and kind of like stays on everyone's body and then flashes, and that's where kind of where it gets past that line of being regular exploitation to like just cheap exploitation, and like tasteless. Because when you cut in actual footage of the day,
see, that's the thing too. Yes,
where it kind of gets
called
that.
it.
And if you guys watched Nicole Brown Simpson yet?
No, God.
No, I don't hate myself quite that much.
I'm gonna spoil a bit of that because we know where that goes too. But that one at the end, it segues to the police arriving, and you see her body, and you see this, and that's where it gets really like, where it gets the bad taste. And this one starts out with that. Luckily, we don't see the bodies, but we do see some of the blood and see some of the place, and that's kind of like,
oh God, you see the crime scene in a big way.
And that's where it really kind of immediately puts a bad taste in my mouth by showing the actual crime scene. If we had a fictionalized narrative and kind of stepped away, but presenting that along with this fake narrative inside of her dreams and this, you know, this other things that happen and almost surviving, that really kind of sets a bad
and then
taste.
You get like a weird, and again, getting back to where it feels incredibly cheap and cheapened. It feels like it really cheapens the tragedy involved. There's a whole scene involving Stephen Parent where he's sitting in his trailer with Sharon Tate, and then he starts talking. They're listening to the Charlie Manson song, and then they play it backwards, and they hear the words "Helter Skelter," which is their way of getting out of having to, you know, hassle with royalty rights for a Beatles song, but so that they could work the Helter Skelter angle in anyway, and which is totally fucking like cheap ass fucking exploitive as hell. And then Parent goes on to this whole expositional paragraph, several paragraphs for a couple of minutes about backmasking. And then all of a sudden it's not in the late 60s anymore. It's in the mid 80s, and it's the fucking satanic panic. Like, what the fuck? It's like, pick a fucking lane, you know? It's, you know, and it's like, I mean, if you're going to be that unwieldy and silly and that tasteless, it just leaves this weird, disorienting flavor in your mouth. Yeah, and
the backmasking and the excuse me, the backmasking and the music they have around that and based on that makes it seem like Charlie Manson is like supernatural. Like,
thank you.
There's some weird like cosmic horror around it, and that changes it up.
They really added a weird like paranormal aspect to it.
I know. The end of the movie, the very end of the movie, where you know, basically Daniel Farrands, the director, sort of attempts to canonize Tate and Jay Sebring and the other victims. it's like you see them walking away in a kind of a quasi-ethereal fashion from the murder scene, and it's like it's almost like Daniel Farrands is placing this cursory spoonful of healthy vegetables onto this plate of like greasy, carb-laden, unhealthy unwholesomeness. It's just really
Cody, you were trying to get in there a minute ago.
sorry.
Oh, no,
right.
it's just an unpleasant movie. It's like,
Thank you.
I like stuff that's bad taste, but it's like, even for me, I'm like, oh, God, really? Because I think there's something really weird and wrong about taking an actual crime and doing a movie like this, where you've now gone past the point of just, okay, here's what happened, or here's what could have happened, to, yeah, we're going the supernatural route. It's like doing like it'd be like if they started doing fucking like mass shooting movies, which are probably going to start happening soon, and it'd be like, oh, well, the Columbine kids were werewolves. Totally fine.
I heard,
And that's what it feels like. It just feels grimy and gross, and like, oh, well, here's something but we're going to add something in, like, oh yeah, there were mummies at this, there were mummies buried under John Wayne Gacy's house.
it's not quite the
same.
same thing, but what Farrands does for Nicole Brown Simpson is now he says that Nick Stahl is this highway murderer who killed her, maybe. It doesn't really fall through its own conjecture, keeps that in the dark. But it's bringing in a false history to actual history and using the same names. There's a difference between like something like this and maybe like Hounds of Love or Henry the Portrait of a Serial Killer, which hones close to reality but stays far enough away that it doesn't feel like it's purposely getting on that.
Cinematic equivalent of like those Ancient Aliens things on History Channel.
Sun Classic Pictures, like the Sun Classic Pictures that used to play in fucking, second run theaters and on drive-in screens all throughout the 70s. In Search of Noah's Ark, The Mysterious Monsters. They'd be like these pseudo documentaries with this real low rent, like the reenactments of the actual events were always super fucking cheap. They made your typical Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Yeah, it's like Welcome to Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, exactly. They made your typical Unsolved Mysteries episode look like fucking, I don't know, like fucking, The Terminator or something, Heaven's Gate, Avalon, that elaborate. It was just
now that you say that, this does now that I was always trying to think of like how I felt the production value is in this, and now I get that it feels like Unsolved Mysteries, style.
Thank you. Exactly.
Recreations.
Down to the really stilted dialogue.
Oh God, I know. There are times when it's just like that dialogue is so fucking stilted. It literally does feel like an Unsolved Mysteries reenactment. It's unreal.
That is perfect. Thank you, Tony, for making me think about that. Except instead of Robert Stack, we get Hilary Duff.
Exactly.
Who can be a decent actress in some things, but
Hilary Duff has to be in the right vehicle to work. If this was everything was like, oh God, no, it was the. With a right script, maybe
I can get past her.
Something respectable.
Everyone is awful. All the writing's bad.
That's the thing, is the writing is fucking dreadful.
Yeah,
and
the writing.
It's one of those things where, ironically enough, the first 20 minutes or whatever that I watched the movie, it just felt so. It felt like I was looking at everything through a really fucking scuzzy film, and it sort of runs on that strange sort of rattle-trapped, unsettling quality, and then after a while it starts to sink in that you're watching a Lifetime movie version of it, and it feels so manufactured and so flat. And I think the actor who plays Jay Sebring, again, classic example. He's like the second or third audition failure before getting the proper role of Pacey on fucking Dawson's Creek or whatever.
I'm impressed you know who Pacey on Dawson's Creek is, because
I've seen the show.
I don't know. Is that the girlfriend, or is that the other one?
The other one.
Okay.
That's Joshua Jackson or whatever.
Yeah, it's
the dude
Joshua
from Fringe.
I can't believe I summoned that up, and that's because this movie. Well, but then again, like I said, I'm going to come back to this tired ass metaphor. This movie is smelly underwear in an urban alley repugnant. It's icky. but it's easily enough avoided and forgotten. And it's funny that I think it was Kim who said that she had completely forgotten about it. She forgot about it after having watched it a year or two ago. I forgot
twice.
About
No. I rewatched it. I rewatched it last week, and I had to like look at my notes because I was like, "Shit, what even happened to this movie?" Hilary Duff had 20 accents.
Thank you.
What's going on?
I watched this afternoon, and it's kind of like a lot of it went away because unfortunately, so much of it is repetitive. It's only like 90 minutes long, but she has a dream when she sees everyone get killed, and she wakes up. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's okay." And then she goes for a walk, and she comes back. The next day, she has a dream which everyone gets killed, and she wakes up. And just because it's that same sequence, the same sequence is over
lather,
and over
rinse,
again,
repeat,
and the same dialogue about fates and
it's weird though because I've been really hyped up on this movie, but yet Brad Pitt was nowhere within it.
But
wasn't he, Cody?
But I did want to actually bring up Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because it was.
Do we have to? No.
Just briefly, I know it's. I didn't like it. It's not going to go on a favorite, but at least that one changed history as well. But there was a lot more reference. I think I drew a lot more out of that.
I think what happens is it felt to me, and again, for better or for worse, this is a grand exploitation movie tradition. It felt to me like your routine cash-in from like fucking American International Pictures or New World Pictures on like this really horrific, repugnant tragedy, but like with absolutely zero like sensibility behind it. It's almost like it wants to be an art house horror movie, but it's too like sloppy and thuddingly literal to do it.
And what? Okay, Kim, good.
I was gonna say yes, but at least in this one, the women got to speak more.
Yes.
Good point. I will say,
and
it may have been dialogue. Oh shit! But yes, they did get to speak.
But they got to say it.
No. Is that
one's all paper thin, saying everything? Which weird is like the characters being so paper thin since they are based on real people with multiple books, multiple things out there,
and interviews,
films.
And,
Helter Skelter's a pretty darn big book, and also I haven't seen the movie for it, but which brings up the question of there's many Mansploitation films in the last 50 years.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't seen many of them. I saw this. I saw Charlie Says from last year. And like Manson Vacation, which isn't actually about Manson, it's about people being involved with him. But I actually haven't seen too many Manson films. Those of you who have, assume anyone else but me, how does this stack up compared to things like Skelter or The House in the Street? Or
I have to be honest, I'm not a huge follower of this particular weird subgenre. I'm very familiar with it, but I mean, it's just, again, it smacks of smelly underwear in an urban alley, and I'm not so into that. But I get the impression that this particular movie doesn't even handle. It's so clumsy in its handling of the real life story that it's like. It's unsettling, and yet it's really super unmemorable. I'm sorry, I feel like I keep circling back, but I really feel like that's the case. That's just like my.
How weird is it though that the Manson exploitation, where Leonardo DiCaprio lights one of them on fire with a flamethrower, is more dignified than me.
Yeah, much more dignified.
More dignified.
Fuck.
I've Cameron, Cody, have you guys seen Helter Skelter?
I read the book. I've
read the book too,
I've never seen the movie.
The miniseries, the original miniseries from 1975 was Steve Railsback.
Yeah, I heard Steve Railsback's amazing as
He is uncanny. That guy is. I mean, I will never forget. I was very young at the time, and it had happened about 7 years before the airing of the Helter Skelter miniseries. But I remember seeing, news footage on 60 Minutes when they were doing retrospective documentaries and stuff. And I remember looking at that and then looking at the miniseries and seeing Steve Railsback and being absolutely convinced that that actor in the miniseries was exactly the same as the guy in the newsreel footage.
He looks a lot like Ed Gein too in the Gein movie he was in the early 2000s. I actually like that one too. But
I will say though, my favorite portrayal of Manson that I've seen is actually from Mindhunter. And he's just in the one episode. I think it's just one episode. But the actor's fantastic. Well,
Yeah,
it's
he also
funny,
played him in Hollywood as well.
in Hollywood. Yeah, he played him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Well, and what I didn't realize, and it cracked me up when I had the realization, is that in the show Justified, he plays Dewey Crow, who's this like redneck, gator poaching hick. And or no, not Dewey Crow. Wait.
I haven't seen Justified, but get your
I
Timothy
didn't get up
Oliphant
to that
on kick.
season, so you can make up whatever you want, Kim. We won't know any better.
But he for me, he did a really fantastic job, but he's also playing him in jail, so you're seeing a very different
Yeah. Now isn't this the Australian actor who was also
it
in
is
the
Dewey
Nightingale?
Crow. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
it is Dewey Crow. Sorry.
Yeah. He's really effective, and
he's great.
He's very disconcerting in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in no small part because they use him very little. And I do also remember one of the other things that was sticking out in my mind in terms of both of these movies do their own willfully revisionist flip-flop of what actually happened. But, for all of his superficiality, you can feel a sense that with Quentin Tarantino, he's not just playing the great white savior of the woman. I think what he's trying to do, and again, he does this in a not very persuasive manner, is I think he's trying to claim back the happy and full lives that the Manson family victims were denied because of Charlie Manson and his family. And again, it's executed with fucking, magic marker on a wall, literalness, but at least there's that sense of that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Whereas with this one, it's like, okay, here, let's have gruesome murder, but all five of the, horribly mutilated victims are walking into the sunrise in the morning because they've died, but they're going off to heaven or some goddamn thing. It just was very,
This movie had less of Quentin Tarantino masturbating all over the place.
Fair enough. Yes.
So,
this is true.
Too.
True that.
But this one, that one, I think, kind of earned its change. You much of it didn't care for it. This one was just a forced Groundhog Day episode of a
Yeah,
TV
exactly.
show. If you mix the production value of Unsolved Mysteries with the standard issue, replay it till you win episodes of like Supernatural or X-Files. This time with Sharon Tate.
Or a really bad torture porn movie, like a really terrible fourth-rate torture porn movie. It's that as well in its own weird way.
And something I wasn't sure on, because I can kind of see going both ways, is I really hated the way that everyone played everything, but in particular the Manson family were all like just scowling and moving around all bad guy-ish. They didn't have any real personality. Also, I don't want them to be humanized, but also they were nothing but a blank boogeyman, and I wasn't sure how to coach that because they didn't play anything to it. But of course, we don't really see anything outside the house, which is a detriment to, I think, the story, because if we're never leaving the same 3-day cycle.
But I think it's why it's so forgettable too, though. Like there's nothing to them, so there's nothing to remember. There's nothing. I'm trying to even recall what any of the actors look like right now, and I'm like,
there's a guy with the slick back hair.
One of them, was one of them.
There's the Asian woman, and
no, she wasn't. See,
exactly. You're hitting the nail on the head with that. I just really found it so. It's like so unmemorable, and then in that under those auspices, it being so unmemorable, it feels it feels all the more tasteless, because it's like you're making a movie about one of the great tragic serial murders in American history, and you've made it kind of fucking dull. What you're doing with this, however unsavory subject matter, is making it fucking dull. You're making it tedious.
Yeah, and with that and like the pacing, when the first time the murders happen during a dream is like at 41 minutes, and besides the opening sequence, and I was wait, are we reaching the end already? And I was like, no, I'm at 40 minutes, because I noticed I thought this movie was slower than this, and like, now are they gonna? I honestly forgot, even as seen before, that it has like 15 dream sequences and mix-ups. That I was like, are we actually gonna spend the next 40 minutes with like a hack and slash? And then then it wakes up and it's back to the same thing for another 10 minutes before she goes to sleep for the next time.
Yep.
And that's like the build was like not there because we didn't have anything on that. We didn't have any suspense of knowing where the killers were, of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Besides a couple of things, besides the tapes coming in and saying, "Oh, Charlie came by a couple of times because he thinks this record producer still lives here," without knowing what they're up to and where things are moving, it doesn't really have the suspense. We don't know the bomb's underneath the table because we never see where the bomb is placed.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking for the movie to have more of a brain in its head than it does, and that's the fucking problem.
Yeah, and I'm not. It's like it's the whole thing there. But actually, I was looking through. Of course, Daniel Farrands has been being more known for these sort of things recently. With this year, last year, this year, Murder Nicole Brown Simpson and Amityville Murders the previous year. I wanted to ask him about Amityville Murders. Did you watch that for your episode for Grave Ghoulish Tendencies?
Which one?
The Amityville Murders that he did 2 years ago?
Oh God, yeah. I watched I rewatched Amityville Horror for it. I've seen the Amityville Murders. Did I rewatch it for that? Oh my God, some of these movies are so generically bad. I'm like, I know I watched it, couldn't tell you when or even most of what happened. I watched for 100 Days of Horror at one point. I think that's when I actually watched it. Was a year or two ago for 100 Days of Horror, and
But you watched the one with the lamp in it, right? That's like the most important Amityville movie.
Oh, totally. No, it is kind of it's funny because it's not good, but it is telling the story straight. I mean,
this is the only one really deal with the Defoes, right?
The DeFeos, yeah.
DeFeo. Sorry, I've been something up for
It's
like
like, you
20
mean,
years.
You mean Willem?
Sorry.
Willem
It's
Dafoe?
stuck in my head. That.
So yeah, you're talking about Amityville 4?
No, Daniel Farrands made one about 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's a
The
very
Amityville
recent
Haunting.
one. But
Okay,
there was one, because I mean, bearing in mind that there's been a crap ton of movies that weren't just part of the official Amityville Horror franchise. There's been other ones that have dealt with it. But yeah, the more recent it was shit, man. It was Amityville Murders.
Yeah.
But there was another one. There was another one before that.
Well, Amityville 2 is a total prequel in which you see the entire DeFeo family,
with a different name.
You see the DeFeo family. You don't see the DeFeo family. They kind of pull a little bit of a Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Like, they're taking a story that is somewhat true, but they changed most of the details. Like, none of the names are the same, and there's other aspects of it that aren't the same.
Now, are you on Amityville 2, The Possession, or are you talking about Amityville Murders from 2 years ago?
I'm talking about Amityville 2.
Okay,
Amityville Murders.
Me also, actually.
Yeah, Amityville 2 takes the case and dramatizes it and fictionalizes it. The Amityville Murders, which came out
2017. Yeah, with
2018
from this same writer director, which is why I was bringing it up.
Yeah. But it's nowhere near like it was. I don't remember feeling icky the same way when I watched it. I don't recall.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I'm gonna eventually. But I do find it funny that I'm looking at the cast now that Diane Franklin and Burt Young are both in that, and they were in Amityville 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They do have him like hearing the voices.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's also something he claimed as part of his defense. So it wasn't like this movie. It played it for the most part more straight, as far as I'm remembering. But again,
it did definitely.
It's kind of like a slide for Daniel Farrands because, of course, he wrote Halloween 6, but then he before he started making amazing horror documentaries before coming back to these, he wrote The Girl Next Door from the Jack Ketchum book, which is based upon an actual murder too. And he plays that one pretty straight and really straight, but also exploitive, because that's the way that Ketchum wrote it originally. I think he co-wrote the script with him. He didn't direct that; someone else directed that, and then he made Never Sleep Again and Crystal Lake Memories, Scream the Inside Story. So he made some
Right.
really great horror documentaries,
Yeah.
and then started directing his true crime changes into film. So I was kind of curious to see, of where Amityville Murders was compared to this and Nicole Brown, which really take it in different directions.
From what I'm remembering, and again, I watched Amityville Murders for 100 Days of Horror. I don't even think it was last year. I think it was 2 years ago. So it's a little bit hazy because it wasn't particularly memorable, but I don't recall. I remember that they touched on him hearing voices. I don't recall it being really supernaturally driven, though. Not the way that this this had that. There wasn't the weirdness that this had in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot more direct to video, like Lifetime kind of feel,
as we see with this and Nicole Brown.
Yeah. I mean, at least, like, I don't know. The Nicole Brown one, part of why I haven't watched it is unlike Amityville Murders, or unlike this one. Like, I was not alive yet when this actually happened. So even though it is based on a real murder, I don't have the same association with it. Where the Nicole Brown one, like, I remember that. I remember the Bronco chase, it's so icky. It's so icky, and not in a kind of way that's fun and enjoyable or titillating, in a ew, dude, really kind of way. Like, I want to apologize to the family on his behalf because this is awful.
Yeah, and that's what what's funny about touching on that. That's why I find it interesting that we all find this movie to be very icky as well, though, that we weren't aware and alive at this point when this happened. But it's so connected to culture, and it's so connected to, we all know this story so well. Anyone who loves true crime and horror and always in movies and
the
Hollywood,
Beatles,
it all comes together, even though we weren't cognizant of it happening then. Most of us weren't alive.
It was so brutal. It was so brutal too. It was so brutal. It was so tragic because beyond the fact that you had just the tragedy of this spree killing, you have a pregnant woman being murdered.
Oh, good heavens, yes.
And again, the if you've, like, I've seen the real crime scene pictures. They're appalling. They are genuinely appalling. So there's, it's funny because we talk about this a little with, I mean, even when I do tea and true crime, or when I do some of the stuff for Ghoulish Tendencies, like, I really deliberately pick cases where there's a fairly large gap between when they happened and today.
And Ghoulish Tendencies is your one of your other podcasts.
One of my other podcasts, yes.
You could find that on iTunes and wherever you find stuff.
I want to say Amityville may have been one of the most, I'm trying to think of all the cases that I've covered. Gabby's done a few that were a little bit more contemporary, but Amityville may have been the most recent of the things I've covered.
Yes, the most recent one I can remember without looking at the list.
I part of it is that detachment, and a lot of, I really hate the idea that there's still people alive who could be harmed by listening to this recount.
Mm-hmm.
And this is such a good example. I mean, it's not like it happened yesterday or even happened Nicole Brown Simpson. I mean, that was the
20 years ago.
Yeah, that was a significant amount of time ago.
Yeah, I was in middle school, so it was like 26 something years,
Yeah, but
and this is 50 years. This is 51 years now.
This is
for
51
the Sharon
years.
Tate murders,
but it's not even like messing with Jack the Ripper. You want to put a supernatural twist to Jack the Ripper, go for it.
Yeah.
But for this, we know what happens minute to minute to minute to minute.
Yeah.
And when you actively change it, and not so obviously like Once Time in Hollywood never pretends to be, it's real.
No.
Yeah. This pretends
it's the same
it's
way
real.
Glorious Bastards isn't pretending to be.
But if someone's not too aware of the actual story and they start watching this, they might think it's the truth.
Yeah.
By starting with news footage, starting with actual footage of the day, it makes it seem like this is a true crime movie, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's a fictionalized
Yeah.
movie,
Very fictionalized.
changing aspects of an actual thing and
Yeah.
never giving you that actual truth of the situation.
Mhm.
Like I was worried watching it both times. I watched it particularly today, like that they actually were going to change it, in which they were going to walk away alive, and then they pull that back at the last second and actually show
Yeah.
that they actually did get killed. Then thankfully they showed that, because that would be, I think, one step too far, out of a movie that's already piece of shit. But
It feels like, I mean, this is not a movie you can, and there's another Sharon Tate movie. Crap, because it's fairly recent. It's one that came out the last couple years. Maybe it's also one where they changed the names. Maybe
Charlie Says from last year from Mary Harron?
No, it's another kind of, it was really similar to this, but it's
Only good.
I'm gonna have to like Google Sharon Tate murder movies, and I'm not really looking forward to that. No, there was a movie that it wasn't Haunting of Sharon Tate, but maybe it, I think I watched it for 100 Days of Horror a couple years ago, which means it was part of many. But I think they may have changed the name, so it wasn't explicitly Sharon Tate, but it was Sharon Tate. Like she was a pregnant, blonde woman.
Oh, someone's obviously supposed to be. I see what you mean.
Yeah, and maybe that's why. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with this. I'm sorry.
I don't know. So,
it's like I have a purpose. I don't remember what the purpose was anymore.
Well, there's not much purpose behind this movie except for exploitation, so that's probably as good a segue as any.
It's true.
Yeah, there's one called The Last of the Manson Girls from 2018, Wolves at the Door 2016, Manson's Lost Girls.
Maybe it was Wolves at the Door. I'll have to go back into my 100 Days of Horror list. I definitely watched it for 100 Days of Horror. I'll have to go back to that list, because it's possible it was a movie that it was Sharon Tate without being Sharon Tate.
Oh, this one uses the actual names, so
yeah.
And Elizabeth Henstridge from Shield plays Abigail. Kate Cassidy. Yeah, I'm just looking. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'll have to go through my list, because it was I swear, unless I'm making this movie up, in which case that's sad.
I mean, there are so many that it gets lost in the mix.
It's its own subgenre.
So I get the Manson exploitation films.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be a good topic for Crypticon last year, but I'm not versed enough to actually try to do that at that point. Go back to
honestly,
2019.
I'm kind of okay not being more versed than this.
Yeah. Leave the murder ones to you and Jason and Tori at late at night.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather just cover the true stories than the whatever the fuck this is.
So any final thoughts on this movie? I think we've really exhausted most of everything. We went off a couple of different non-movie tangents.
Yeah.
It sucks,
which
don't
is
watch
easy
it.
to do. Yeah, which is easy to do because it's so fucking it's alternately distasteful and profoundly unmemorable.
Yeah, if for some reason this isn't so bad it's good. It's just
no, it's just bad.
If you so wanted to watch it, it is on Amazon Prime, but I'm not recommending it. But so might as well come and say next week's movie. So I did pull from we're looking at 2007. We're looking at Daddy Day Camp, the sequel to Daddy Daycare from 2003. Though I haven't seen nor have we talked about the last one. I'm yeah, but hey, well, I'm still gonna watch it. It's funny enough. Daddy Daycare, the first one,
that one I've seen,
is a 38 on Metacritic, so it's a little higher, but it's a 77th worst movie that year. So I'm probably never gonna get to it, but it's on there. So we're gonna talk about Daddy Day Camp.
But Bob, how will you follow it without watching the first one?
I am going to watch the first one, so it might come up in conversation. So we'll see about that. And I'm not sure. I know it's streaming. I'm not sure where. I think it's a rental. But it did pop up on Just Watch. But thank you for anyone who's listening through us rant about The Haunting of Sharon Tate.
Jennifer
Thank you anyone
Lovely.
who sat down and watched the 85 minutes of it for this podcast. You're awesome. Thank you everyone out there might be liking and sharing and listening. Always do so, please. You can find us at last movie, the worst movie of the year .transistor.fm, on iTunes, on cgeek.com with our regular podcast and regular reviews. And everything that goes on there. Facebook.com/the worst movie of the year, or Facebook.com/City of Geek, or on Twitter at City of Geek and at worst_movie. Plenty of places, but everyone who's talking here has other places you can find their work as well. So if anyone wants to kind of give their plugs to their non-City of Geek work, go for it, guys.
Well,
Tony.
Oh,
Someone.
well, someone. Okay, yeah. This is Tony. I also write for a website called thesunbreak.com about film, and then I write about music for a website called artisthome.org. So you can read my rantings about all sorts of film and music in those locations.
I have another podcast called Ghoulish Tendencies, and you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. We cover true crime, ghost stories, urban legends, anything that's creepy or ghoulish. I also have an upcoming Tea and True Crime. We're going to be talking about Belle Gunness, who is a female serial killer, and she's kind of fascinating. So if you're interested, you can find more information at spookedinseattle.com. It's going to be happening on Sunday, June 14th at 4 p.m. via Zoom.
Awesome.
Cody?
I have nothing outside of City of Geek, but you can always find me at City of Geek Cody on Twitter.
Fair enough. And I am just on City of Geek, essentially. Though I will be on an upcoming episode of Don't Read the Latin, and Kim was on the previous one.
I was on the previous one.
You can find us on there with Jennifer Lovely, who was on the folk horror episode this past summer.
Who we should have back.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
I'm just having another vagina around.
It's always good to do that. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the worst movie of the year. You can find us regularly at cityofgeek.com and listen to us every week for whatever shitty movie we're talking about. So come back next week for Daddy Day Camp. And we'll see you guys next time with the shitty movies.